When I was 15 years old, I was taken in the middle of the night by two strangers against my will to a wilderness program in the Uinta Mountains. That was the first night of 37 months in which I would spend enduring the harsh realities of the troubled teen industry. I didn't get out until I ran away at 18 and a half years old and never went back. Before I dive into the specifics of my experiences, I'm going to define the troubled teen industry as encompassing therapeutic boarding schools, residential treatment centers, behavioral modification programs, and wilderness programs. These programs market themselves towards parents as the only option for struggling adolescents. And because regulation varies from state to state, we see major hubs pop up in places like Utah, Montana, and Texas. And that is the system in which I entered at 15 years old. The chain of events that ultimately resulted in my parents' decision to send me away looked like turning 14. Prior to that, I didn't exhibit any of these issues. But almost immediately after starting high school, I was getting in more arguments with my family. I started smoking weed. I wasn't going to school. It quickly turned into using other substances like acid. I was drinking. I just had a complete disregard for my education. Mental health wise, I was suffering all the time. I felt very isolated. I was acting out. My parents and I had absolutely no elements of communication. And just overall as a family, we were really, really struggling to listen to each other and I guess just function cohesively. There were so many things that went on within the year before I did get sent away. And it's just so hard to pinpoint because it all happened so fast. It's like all of these behaviors just totally escalated within the short span of a year, and suddenly I was completely out of control. We tried some family therapy, but at that point, I don't even know if I showed up. It was nowhere near on my priority list. I lost a lot of friends. I hurt a lot of people, and I was undeniably struggling very, very deeply. Despite all of this, nothing prepared me for what the next 3.5 years of my life were going to look like. I remember the night before I got sent away very clearly because I was going to go to my friend's house and sleep over, which I did almost every night because I rarely did stay at home. But I remember I was especially tired, so I decided I was just going to stay at home, which was pretty out of the ordinary for me. The following morning, maybe around 5 a.m., I was woken up by a man and a woman who I had never seen before. I was very confused. I saw my parents waiting in the doorway, just like looking down at the ground, and I knew something bad was happening. They told me to get dressed and that they were taking me away. The dog was barking. Like, I was just in total shock. Yeah, absolutely terrified. I got dressed and they each took me by an arm and walked me down to the car where we drove to the airport. Got on an airplane, and about an hour and a half later, I landed in Utah. I was given to two new people who were wearing shirts that said Second Nature. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. We walked to the car and we were driving for about 3 hours. I wasn't talking much. I finally worked up the courage to say, like, can I shower when I get there? They said there are no showers where you're going, and that's sort of when I knew that I was in some deep shit. They drove me to a base camp, which was in Duchesne, Utah. They made me squat and cough, strip searched me, did an intake, drew my blood, took my weight, everything like that. And then they took all my clothes, put me in wilderness clothes, and gave me a very large backpack. We drove 2-3 hours deep into the mountains, and that's when I started seeing all these fires. I was dropped off at around 10 p.m. to a camp. I was placed at a little fire. I could see a bunch of other girls in the distance. A staff came up to me and told me I was now at Second Nature. I was on Earth phase. I was not allowed to speak to anybody. And we were going to be getting ready for bed soon, but we could talk more in the morning. I got in my sleeping bag that night. All the girls were lined in a circle around me, and I was in the middle of the circle with a tarp over me. And there were two staff on either side of the tarp, so I was locked into my space, unable to move. I remember looking up at the stars last night, and I knew like my whole life was going to change. And I had this deep intuition that I wasn't going home for a very, very long time, which turned out to be more true than I even knew then. The following morning, I think I was a little bit in shock, but all the other girls started breaking down the camp, like sifting ash in these like little buckets and picking up all the tarps. And then suddenly we were hiking. I still was not allowed to speak to anybody. We hiked for about 6 miles that day, and then we got to the next camping spot. Staff came up to me and told me I needed to fill out, I guess, all of this information. It's like you have to complete a certain amount of work to get off of Earth Phase, and that consisted of me writing my life story, and what I would have to do is present that to the group with therapist approval, and if it was an honest account of, I guess, my life, then I would be put on Fire Phase, where I could communicate with the group and be on the same page as everybody else. Eventually, I met with the therapist and I read my life story to the group. I think maybe the next day. On Tuesdays, you get letters. And your first letter is what's called an impact letter. And that is basically your parents stating all of the reasons that they chose to send you away. I think that I still have the impact letter somewhere, but I don't want to read it because it will make me very sad. I think what I remember it ending with is my mom telling me that she expected me to be in institutions for a very long time, which was, that is exactly what happened. Every Tuesday, we would get letters from our parents. We weren't allowed to talk to anybody else, no phone calls either, but we would get a letter from our parents, and we would also write a response and send it to our parents. And we would also have therapy. We had an hour-long therapy session every Tuesday where we would kind of work on our goals or like establish our goals, figure out what the following week was going to look like. The typical stay for Wilderness, I'd say, was 8 to 12 weeks. I got out at 14 weeks. Another crazy factor is that showering, or like hygiene, looked like we would set up a tarp and we would each get 2 billy buckets, we called them. We would get to heat them up on the fire, and we would do this on Sundays and Wednesdays. Those were like our hygiene days. And we would pour it over our head. We would get 15 minutes. Every time you're behind the tarp, you have to say like Lucy, 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 or count so they know you're not going anywhere or like doing anything sketchy. We would get to do our laundry once a week. We would send it in with a truck, and then it would bring it back to us the following week. So a lot of re-wearing clothes. We were dirty like the whole time we were there. It was absolutely disgusting. Every single night we ate out of these cups, and to clean our cups, we would go fill them with dirt after we finished eating, and then we would scrape out the dirt with our fingers, and then we would dip the cups in boiling water for 3 seconds. And that was what that looked like. We got these disposable cameras. We didn't have them the second time I was there, but we did have them the first time. And so here's some pictures I took on my camera. This is like what the average camp setup would look like. This was a hike. It was so cold the first time I was there. I actually got driven to the hospital, which like doesn't happen often for frostbite. My toe turned purple. That's me in a tent. The second time I went, we didn't get tents, but since it was freezing the first time, we did. Those were 2 of my friends. This was a fire I made. This was a lunch in the middle of a hike. Like, it was just nothing for, like, I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere. This is another one of my friends. And this was a staff member I really liked in the tent. So after the 14 weeks I spent in the Uinta Mountains, I thought that the worst was over. There was something that they always spoke about called aftercare. I knew that it was 100% probable that I was going to be attending another facility after I got out of Wilderness. What I didn't know was what that facility would truly look like. I thought it was going to be more of a school setting, and I was very wrong about that. So I was placed at Vista Sage. Immediately upon arrival, I was searched again. I was told that I couldn't speak, and I was given something called a point sheet. Every single aspect of the day was attributed to a number of points, like wake up, make bed, 5 points, eat breakfast, 10 points. Basically, if you ever scored below 80% on this point sheet, your speaking privileges were revoked for the following week. It was a very, very strict program with a very specific rule set, which was very, very difficult for somebody like me to follow. I had major ADHD. I was overall like defiant, but I'd say I was very well behaved in this program compared to the ones that I'll talk about next. And even still, I suffered very terribly. In this program, there were phases. 0 phase, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those were all the levels, and 4 was when you'd finally be able to be considered for leaving. I never got past a level 2 the whole year that I was there. It was a very fancy place. It was, I believe, there was a Utah Jazz player called Paul Millsap, and this was his old house. So there was like a big indoor basketball court on the bottom floor, a gym. It was like a very nice looking mansion. This program was very big on compliance. So like the point sheet, that was like a super strict routine. Whenever you were on 0 phase, you couldn't speak. So this was like a typical punishment. Another punishment looked like wearing hospital scrubs. That would differentiate you from your peers and show that you had done something wrong. If you were ever placed on 0 as a punishment, they would call you 0, like 0 over here. And to get your speaking privileges and your other privileges back, also in 0, you couldn't contact your parents or anybody like that. You had to fill out sort of a phase request every Tuesday, and if they approved your phase request, then you were allowed to be back on level 1. Level 1, you got a 10-minute phone call monitored, I think twice a week. Level 2, you have the option to call an approved friend, which was like a big deal. And I guess it sort of went like that. That was the trajectory. Level 3, you got to have like a special thing every week, like maybe watch a movie. Level 4, you got to go out and get food once a week. And then you were at the level where you were able to leave. Again, this was a more structured program. So we did have school for the beginning half of the day. They were very strict about things like food there. Like you couldn't do any extra snacks. All the meal times were very planned, and you were expected to eat a specific amount. It was just very limited in all aspects. We had groups every single day, and it was a lot of what I'd say, just like, it was like humiliation rituals, disguised as therapeutic intervention. We would go to AA twice a week. I would sit there and say, "Hi, my name is Lucy, I'm an addict." That has actually never been the case for me, although it was a symptom of some of the issues I was displaying. And so I think that was also pretty difficult. We had family therapy once a week too. Overall, there was no privacy. Anything you speak about in the program is related to your parents. So lots of things that I would have chosen to keep private forever, I wasn't able to do that. We had activities once a week that you could sign up for. Looked like horseback riding or going out to get a soda or something like that. Nothing particularly fun. I made some good friends there that I still talk to today. And I think like the craziest thing about this place is like I didn't do well in any of my programs, but in this program, right? Like I was defiant. I didn't particularly follow the rules, and I ended up doing something called a lateral move, which is where they sent me to a level of equal care. They basically like kicked me out and sent me somewhere worse. But even my friends who did almost thrive in this program or eventually did get out and get to go home, they were totally like brainwashed when they left. That's from their own words. It's like you don't know how to act. You're just thrown back into the real world. So by following the rules, you're getting hurt too. Just like by not following the rules, I was hurt. It's just like a really, I don't know, lose-lose sort of situation. The whole time I was in that program, I kept sort of like, I don't know, not really a journal, but I made sort of like a scrapbook inside of a book. So I have like, really some crazy relics in here that me and the other girls in the program all sort of contributed to. And it is, totally crazy to look at this. This was a letter that my grandmother sent me while I was in the program. She wrote to me very, very frequently. I have like all of these poems that one of my friends wrote. We later found out that some really bad things were happening to her at Vista, and she overdosed, I think a couple years ago. So it's crazy to see those two, because if I didn't make this book, like I would have, I don't know, none of that. Yeah, I have letters from staff, I have letters from friends. I don't open this too often because it is very painful. The clinical director, I believe she was my therapist, and she was like nobody I've ever met. Like, I still to this day think about her and think that she was actually a witch. And I don't say that in like any loose terms at all. She had an aura unlike anything that I could even describe if I tried. Vista Sage was a lot of CBT and DBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, and like a branch of it is dialectical behavioral therapy, which I feel like is typically utilized for clients with like borderline, bipolar, things like that. Every time we would do something against the rules, besides the natural consequence of zero phase, we would have to write out something called a behavioral chain analysis, where we would identify the problem, write out the chain of events that led to it, and then for each event that occurred, we'd have to write the productive skill that we could have used instead of what actually happened. And then at the end, we'd just sort of like write a page of analysis about that, and then we'd submit it. And that was a pretty standard sort of thing. I think zero phase was crazy too because it also encompassed nonverbal communication. So say like somebody smiled at you or you smiled at them, then they were also now on zero for a week and couldn't speak either. And there was pretty much no flexibility around that. I was on zero many, many times. I was without a voice many, many times, without phone calls. I was really close with this girl who I'm still friends with today. They thought we were too close, so they put us on this consequence called 10 foot, where we had to stay 10 feet away from each other at all times, and we could not speak. That was sort of towards the end of my stay. I remember my parents telling me that nowhere else was going to take me after I left Vista, and I was so angry that they would say that because I didn't feel like it was my fault. At that point, I felt like I had done a lot of work too. Like, I was a totally different person than when I'd entered the programs. If there was any time for me to have been taken out of treatment, it would have been before I ever got sent to BSA. I do think that there were other options, and I think it was a decision that caused me harm. I remember my parents driving me to this next program, and they told me it was going to be less strict, that the girls there really loved it, and that, I don't know, just that it was going to be easier for me, and that they used a therapeutic model called positive peer culture, where instead of like staff and therapists telling you what you're doing wrong, it was your peers, so they thought it would be easier for me to accept the feedback, which was very, very far from true. I think it's the most harmful therapeutic model that was ever utilized in a facility that I went to. When I first got to Big Sky Academy, I knew that it wasn't what my parents had said. We were driving the middle of nowhere, Missoula, Montana, up this sketchy little road called Cramer Creek Road. And we're just, driving for what feels like hours and hours just into nothingness. And we walk in, it's covered in snow, it's totally freezing. I'm greeted by a therapist and shown where I'm gonna be staying. It's this like super small, shitty little cabin. The showers are always cold. There's just like, I don't know, these little crappy shower curtains covering the showers. It's just, it's terrible. It's totally different than Vista. Nothing nice about it. Vista like pretended to be nice and was evil inside. This place did not pretend at all to be nice. At any point, somebody else in your group, or you for yourself, could call a group based on one of 12 problem behaviors, which consisted of like low self-image, aggravates others, lying to others. It was all written out, and I don't have the list anymore. But you would select one, and then everyone on your group would give you feedback or say how they've seen this problem show up. Even more humiliating than anything I endured at Vista. It was a lot of ganging up on each other. It was just a lot of like bashing, berating. I had like pretty much given up by the time I was in this program. Like, I felt like I was never gonna go home. All the girls I saw leave were 18 years old. I was 16 at this time. I had pretty much no hope of ever leaving. One of the worst nights of my life was at this program. I remember me and two of my friends got taken during dinner to this room called, I think it was GRS. It was basically a cabin with all the windows boarded up and a mattress on the floor where you went as a punishment. We hadn't done anything wrong. We were put in this room. One of the girls started freaking out, hitting her head against a wall. We were screaming at the staff to do something. They told us it was our fault that we were in here. They wouldn't let us out. Eventually it got so bad that they did intervene. It broke out into a full fight. Me and the other girl were like having pin. I mean, it was absolutely terrifying. And we were told by the staff to sit in the corner and sing the ABCs while this like insane fight was breaking out. Like there were multiple staff there. I believe like 5 staff quit after that night because of how bad it was. Eventually the girl calmed down and fell asleep, and I remember we were like singing her songs to sleep. And about 5 minutes after she had fallen asleep, we see these 2 people come inside the cabin and grab her by the arms, and they said that they were taking her. Me and my friend were just like crying and crying. We were like, can we at least say goodbye? She's kicking and screaming while they're pulling her out, and they said that was your goodbye. And like we tried to tell like people what happened that night. Like not even our therapist was there. It was like the clinical directors and some of the boys staff. And like I tried to tell my parents. Every time I tried to explain how bad it was to my parents, they would just be told that I was lying, that I just wanted to get out. I didn't speak the truth. It was just like such crazy manipulation. And so nobody listened to me about how terrible that was. The staff told us that it was either her or us, and we should be lucky that it was her. And we never saw her again. I have like journal entries from this specific program, but they're so hard to read because my cursive is so small. While I was at this program, COVID became a thing, and I had absolutely no idea until October 19th. Morning thoughts, October 19th, 2020. Today we started a ranch-wide quarantine. So far it's fine, considering we've watched Netflix and eaten Eggos. A very strange 24 hours, clearly. COVID scares me. I value being healthy a lot, and I do not feel safe. 4 hours later, I'm pissed off. Dale, who is, I guess, like the owner, made us go to school for no reason. We're not allowed to use computers, and I don't know why we're wasting our time stuck in this small room. All I wanted to do was play Monopoly. I'm 17, I've outgrown treatment, and I should be home, but I know that that's not possible. Ranting journal. I'm trying to tell myself nice things right now. I make bad decisions, but that doesn't mean I am bad, because that's not the case. I have the capacity to be a good kid. It's not too late. I shouldn't be embarrassed for fucking up, but rather remorseful. Nothing can't be repaired. Fight the thinking errors, Lucy. Do what Simon always said to. Focus on the good. That is all there is. Work on yourself and don't obsess over being best friends with everybody. Be kind, care always. It doesn't feel right to not have a person, because I feel so codependent, and I know that's a problem. I have never felt more alone in my life. I also forgot to add that one of the main day-to-day activities was something called incentive wages, where we would ultimately perform manual labor for $1.50 an hour. Like I remember one time we literally all had shovels and we're like digging pipes out of the ground. Like we built fences for the garden. We would build window screens. We would deep clean the kitchen, like all this crazy stuff. And then with our earnings, we were able to buy like a chocolate bar and a Gatorade from this like store that they opened. Which was like, rarely ever a thing. And they sent us a check when we left the program. And for all of that, I had to show $48. I don't even know how to detail this program. Like, it was just absolutely miserable. It was the worst year of my entire life, I think, and that is really saying something. The place itself was just terrible. Kids ran away, but there was nowhere to go. They always just got taken right back. We didn't even have therapy. Like, there was no individual sessions. Twice a week, we would do this thing called Formal, where we would all go into the therapist's office, and she would sort of host a group session where we would pick one person and focus on them and their problems. They would pick what they wanted to work on. Then we would all give feedback and advice under the instruction of the therapist. But there were no individual sessions. They didn't care about us at all. The food was absolutely terrible. We got like powdered eggs in the morning and chicken, like fried steak, and it was just totally disgusting. I think another important thing to mention that started at Vista Stage would just continue to escalate throughout the duration of my whole time in the program is the medications I was on. I mean, at that point, it was like Prozac, 60, this is one of the crazy parts, 60 milligrams of Vyvanse every single morning. And then I was also on hydroxyzine 3 times a day. I was taking trazodone at night. I was on Lamictal. I mean, I think there was a point where I was on 13 medications. And one of the craziest parts of the medications was the Vyvanse, because that's, I mean, insane. I was 80 pounds. I will show a picture because I was totally emaciated. I couldn't eat food. They were constantly getting on me about my eating disorder problem, which I've never had once in my entire life. I just could not eat food because I was on so much stimulants. And the meds, I mean, they just got crazier and crazier. They just kept adding more and more things. My parents came to visit, I think, twice while I was there. It was bad every single time. I just felt totally screwed. Like, they weren't listening to me. Nobody was listening to me. Nobody cared that I was never going to go home. And that was true. You know, that wasn't made up. And I totally acknowledge that the parents suffer like lots of manipulation, just like we did in there. So it's sort of hard to assign blame on that avenue. So COVID did happen, like I was saying. We did like the quarantine. We got TVs in our dorms, which was like super strange. School stopped completely. We never even did school there. We used like the Ngenuity online learning platform. Nothing was, there was no oversight. I basically didn't have any education the whole year I was there. About a month after quarantine started in October, 2 months actually, we got word one day that Big Sky was shutting down and that in a week we would all be going home or getting moved to another program. And I hated that place so much. Like, I hated Big Sky, but I wasn't 18 yet. I remember just like bursting into tears because I knew that I wasn't going to get to go home and that I was just going to get moved somewhere else. So like, as bad as that program was, like I was going to have to start over for the 3rd time now at a whole new program. Mom and Dad, BSA is shutting down. I know I said this place was trash, but oh my god, this sucks so bad. I can't even comprehend how I ended up here, in Montana, exactly the month I was sent to Second Nature in 2018. I am angry because this shouldn't have happened. I should have had more time. This was supposed to be the end. I say this with understanding to the fact that I got myself into this position. I know I'm responsible for my own actions. The trouble comes down to accountability, or rather the lack of. I'm willing to advocate for myself because, well, I want to, and if nothing else, to express my opinions on the next step. I'm struggling and have been since July after you guys came to visit. For the first time, it felt natural to be with family. Afterwards, everything felt wrong. Treatment became miserable and it wasn't home. Prior treatment was a comfort zone, so goodbyes were easy. As you know, the weeks after I started messing up worse than before. I could give you 100 excuses, but that wouldn't help anyone. I feel defeated, and I truly think I've learned a lot here, although I fail to show that sometimes. Anyways, I want to request going to a real step down or transitional living. This would be good because whether or not I'm 18 really means anything. The day is coming in 8 months. I want to be in an environment that's less structured, somewhere I can finish school. Ngenuity isn't going to transfer my current classes, meaning I'll have to start over again, and I really want to be independent. It would be so beneficial considering this is the one thing we haven't tried. I think I was most successful in wilderness, not saying at all that I want to go back, but because I was able to be somewhat self-sufficient and genuine. I don't know, I just really want to be free. Ultimately, I know I haven't consistently exemplified change. However, it has been demonstrated sporadically. I can do this. I can't say I won't be upset if I get placed in another RTC, but even then I owe it to myself and everyone else. I would really appreciate being able to talk about this, but also just talk in general. I miss you, Lucy. So I think at this point, my parents weren't talking to me. It had been like a couple months because I wasn't making enough progress in the program, so we didn't have a lot of communication. Anyways, that did not happen. I ended up being the last student on the whole property, me and the chef, as we waited for transportation to come take me to my next residential treatment center, which was called Sunrise in St. George, Utah. Big Sky Academy had some even sketchier issues going on than I can probably comprehend. They had a sister program called High Frontier, which I talked about earlier. It was the ranch. And I believe that program had a lot of kids who were sent by CPS there. It got shut down. I think that there were sexual abuse allegations. I believe that some girls may have even died there. And all the remaining children who were there got moved to my Montana program about halfway through my stay. And I think even before High Frontier, there was another program managed by the same people in New Mexico. And I know some equally crazy stuff happened there. I don't want to speak on it too much because I don't want to get false information, but I do know that it was incredibly fucked up and corrupt, and all leads back to one man. I was driven 14 hours by the transporters from Montana to southern Utah. And I mean, same drill. I was searched, I was body mapped, all my stuff was taken, and I was put in a room. And this program is probably the one that I was worst behaved at. I mean, I had absolutely no hope, no will to live. I was depressed, I was suicidal, I was angry. I had what I felt was absolutely no support. I was just counting down until I could sign myself out. I didn't know what was going to happen when I signed myself out. I didn't think I would have my parents' support, but I knew that I was going to die if I stayed inside of these treatment centers, that it was killing me. My sense of self was just totally diminished at this point. I just aligned with being like a bad kid. I thought that I was hopeless. I thought that I was treatment resistant. I was diagnosed with maybe like 15 things by this point on all of these meds. So Sunrise functioned on these levels. I think that a staff wrote this paper for me. So safety, has no jewelry, has to sleep in safety room, arm's distance from staff at all times, must count in the bathroom, no phone calls, can't go outside. Discovery is level 1, has to stay in line of sight, you don't have to count in the bathroom, you can wear jewelry, 20-minute phone calls, and you can move out of the safety room. Belonging is level 2, you only have to check in with staff every 15 minutes. You have like MP3 privileges, and you can have 30-minute phone calls, and you are able to go on an overnight with your parents. Integrity, level 3, makeup privileges, check in every 30 minutes, can be outside alone during the day. You can earn a home visit, and you can move like upstairs because there were a couple houses with different floors. Interdependence, level 4, you can get a meal plan, check in every hour, move in a transition room, you get a fun pass. You can have a phone call with friends, and you can have an email. I never got to level 4. Level 5, you get a phone, which was like the first program I ever heard of where you got a phone. You can go off campus without a staff. You don't have to go to every group, and you can make your own schedule, and then you're basically like on the road to leaving. I'd say I spent the majority of my year on safety and level 1. My attachment issues were all out of whack at this program, just because I think like I was so abandoned. I was just lashing onto anything that I thought cared about me, which did cause some problems in my psyche and relationships. I was on this thing called like day-to-day level because, I don't know, they just wanted to see if it would work for me, which is where my level was determined by the amount of points I got during the day. So sort of like Vista, but this was honestly way, way, way less intense. So here's what it looks like. And this is, I guess, what the points were based off of. So the staff would select what they thought that I earned and then sign it. I would also select what I thought I earned. I mean, it's like absolutely ridiculous. So this paper says Lucy's role in relationships, apathy scale rating. I'm a very empathetic person. Like, yeah, I don't know. Mental connection. In what ways / when did I view the relationship through trauma and attachment lens? What emotions and unhealthy thinking patterns / shame came up? When did I feel like I needed to protect myself? What did I do to distance myself? I had to fill out all of these things. Like, it was just a lot of like, I don't know, it was so stupid. Like, I was 17 years old too. I remember the Christmas that I was at Sunrise, I didn't get anything from my parents, which I remember really hurt. Like, with the exception of Wilderness, they had always sent me stuff for my birthday and Christmas, and it was like one small thing that made me feel like I still like mattered in my family. And I remember that year, because I had left BSA and like 2 weeks later was Christmas, and we all sat in a circle and we were given like a present at a time to open in front of everybody, and everybody was opening all these presents, and I got like this little cardboard Amazon box, and when I opened it, it was a book called The Power of Now and The Body Keeps the Score. And I called my parents and asked why they got me that for Christmas, and they said that that was not a Christmas present. Which seems like a small thing and like superficial, but that was very painful. That's like one of the only photos I have of myself at that time of life. I found this like in the book that I kept. It says, "You have been searched." Taken: Cliff Bars, Gatorade, apple cider. Maybelline palette, body spray. Contraband: Forever 21 shorts, black overalls, pink wild fable sparkly tank top, Paxton white shorts, green crop top, purple American Eagle crop top, distress shirt, green shorts, and army shorts. So they would like search us spontaneously and read our journals. We had no privacy or autonomy. I got really attached to specifically one of the staff members at this treatment center, and that was just like a total cause of turmoil for me. I think it was just so many issues accumulating. Like I just had like nothing to hold on to, and that became like the biggest theme, I guess, of that treatment center, was just my attachment issues. I was in the worst place maybe at this treatment center. I had like a lot of self-harm problems. And that came up very frequently. And I just like, I don't know, I just had a lot of blow-ups. I remember one day I was having like a really hard time, and they called for help from, I guess, like one of the other like higher up people, residential manager or something like that. I had no idea. I had calmed down maybe like an hour after I had settled down. This man came, and it's really all a blur. As I remember, I wasn't doing anything at this point. I just wanted him to leave. I was like, go away, like, because there was no reason for him to be there. And he was trying to exemplify to the other two staff how to restrain me. Like, he's like, no, you can't put up with this. Like, this is what you should do. And I remember him like turning me around, and he put his elbow into like my spine, and I just like, I couldn't even, I kicked him in the face as hard as I could. And it was like a total automatic response. Like, I think if somebody grabs you, like, it should be your automatic response to defend yourself. And I did. I kicked him right in the face. And he left. And I knew that I was screwed. That night, I went to sleep. And the following, or like, at midnight, I was woken up by two strangers and put in a car, grabbed me by both of my arms from the treatment center. They took me back to Wilderness. The only thing worse than going to Wilderness once is going twice. An hour later, they say that I look familiar. They're like looking at me trying to figure out why I look familiar, and I'm not sure why. And they say, oh my God, did you go to a program in Montana? And I said, yeah, why? And they said, we took your friend that night that you were locked in that cabin. They said, you looked so scared. We remember you were tiny and crying. And they told me that that was the worst program they had seen in their 21 years of being transporters. And that was just like a surreal moment for me. Then I remembered them too. They were very nice to me. They were like, we'll come and pick you up when you get out. And they did. I was in Wilderness for 5 weeks. Same drill. It was easier than the first time. It was shorter than the first time. It also wasn't winter. I don't even know if anything notable happened in those 5 weeks. It was sort of just like a waiting game. Then I got sent back to Sunrise. They moved me to a different house, so now I was away from all my friends and all the staff that I liked, and they forbid me from going into that house. So they're just like right next to each other. So I'm with all these new girls who I'm not friends with. Every day I'm like devastated that I can't be with the girls that I had relationships with, like really good ones. Like my best friend to this day was my roommate on my very first day, and now we're both like doing so well. I love her so much. I tried to do better after that. Like I got back from Wilderness. I got level 3 for the first time. Like I got all these things saying like, we're proud of you. You're like doing better. And I wasn't doing better at all. But I was acting better, I guess. And that's really all that they ever cared about in any of these places, was that you were acting better. I start spending more time in Sequoia, and I get really, really close with Cami. Suddenly we're totally inseparable. We're best friends. Then comes my 18th birthday, I remember they decided we were going on a camping trip. So on July 26th at 4 a.m., they wake me up, put us all in a car. We go camping. It's raining the whole day. I just turned 18, so I can't be with like any of the girls who are younger than me. And so I'm alone in a tent. It's pouring rain, and I'm like just asleep. Like I was too depressed to like even go outside. I just slept for 2 days. And then I was 18, and you'd think that it would be easy to leave after you're 18, but it wasn't. My parents weren't going to support me if I left. I had no job, no education. I was totally alone and terrified. And so I was in the Sequoia, the 18-year-old house. Cami and I, like, we had more freedom. Like, we would eat like ice cream together. Like, she got me through it. Like, I was just totally in love with her. And I think if we didn't go through that together, things would have turned out very differently. One day, she learns that she gets to go home. And so her mom comes to pick her up, and I hug her goodbye. And like, we're both crying, like, it's so sad because we got so close. And then she calls me like 20 minutes later, and she comes to bring me a soda from Swig because like Utah dirty sodas, like that's the whole vibe. And I am then like all alone. The hardest part of my treatment story in its totality is that that was the last time I would ever hug Cami because she killed herself a year later. And so all I have is the memories that we made in that house, like the videos that we made, and that's all that I will ever have. Like 3 weeks later, I don't even remember the timeline, they tell me that they don't think I'm getting any better there, and that they suggest I moved, or that I'm going to be moving to a different program, that they will no longer have me. I get moved to a program called Telos, which was in Orem, Utah. My parents pick me up. They say, like, if you behave, like, we'll talk about you coming home in 3 months. I go there. I don't want to be there. There's, not even much to say. I got sent to the hospital twice. I got stitches. I got glued back together. I was totally depressed. Then impulsively one day I leave with this other girl who's there, and we just like get on a bus. And then I'm like, I can't go back. Like, I don't care what happens. Like, I can't go back. And I text a friend who I knew lived in southern Utah, outside of the treatment center, but who was there with me. And they tell me that I can come stay at their apartment. And so I go back to Telos, I grab my stuff, and my therapist actually like helped me. He drove me to a train station, and I think he even paid for my train ticket. And I ran away, and I never went back. Okay, so that is where my story in the troubled teen industry ends. However, for the next 3 years, I dealt with all the repercussions of everything that happened. I did not know how to cope with everything I experienced within those facilities. Even still to this day, if I think about it too much, like, I'll start crying. Like, it's so intense. It's gotten easier in so many ways, but because those were such formative years, it's become a fundamental part of who I am as a person. Everything that I think and how I perceive the world was shaped by this very tumultuous, intense 3.5 years of like hell. So about 3 weeks after I got out, my parents' support was contingent on me staying in the program, and since I left, they were not supporting me. I was living on my friend's floor. I was a passenger in a car accident pretty soon after that, where I broke my neck and my spine. I got a spinal fusion. My mom came out. We were able to talk a little bit. She helped me get an apartment. I had no education for the past couple years, so I had to go get my GED, which I did. I started taking classes at the college in St. George. I had to rebuild my whole life. I didn't know anybody. My body was out of treatment, but my mind was, just in this like terrible cycle of survival mode. I didn't know how to interact with people. I didn't even know what TikTok was. Like, none of these things were comfortable. I had to relearn how to do everything. I stayed in Utah for the next 2.5 years, living on my own. Eventually, I made some friends. The whole time, I desperately wanted to go home, but my parents weren't ready to help me do that yet. Finally, when I was 20 years old, I moved back to California. It was absolutely terrifying, even though it's everything that I had wanted. I knew that I was coming back as a totally different person to a totally different place. I knew that I wouldn't have any friends, that I would be rebuilding like never before, although I was used to that. So, everything that I have right now, which is just like such a beautiful life. I have such a beautiful apartment. I have great friends. I have a good relationship with my family. I like cooking and painting, and I do so much like nannying. Like, I absolutely love working with kids, and I'm in school, slow and steady, but finally on the right trajectory to finish everything. And I have, like, I'm one of the lucky ones because making it out, like, I think a lot of it was luck. So many girls that I know were not able to make it out, and I don't think that's any fault on them. I think the trauma that we went through is like irreversible in a lot of ways. And I just like feel for the people who never like escaped, all that pain. And I think that it is one of my purposes, just like continue to grow from this and help other people in any way I can, even if it's not necessarily treatment oriented, just like that feeling of being trapped and having to shed every single part of your identity over and over and over again, because I feel like that's who I am. Like, I'm constantly just growing and changing, and I wasn't the same person last year. I was a totally different person 2 years ago, and I don't know where I'll be next year. All I can hope to do is keep going up, and I am proud of myself for everything that I have done, because there was a point where I never thought any of this was possible. Like, I thought that was gonna be my whole life, and it wasn't. And yeah, I just am very lucky. I'm very lucky. Yeah.